of third dimensional reality. And my observation would be, for those people who have become excited by Rick's work, and I'm sure, obviously, Rick would encourage those who have the interest and the motivation to pursue it further.
Yes.
But the nature of this game is not to necessarily suddenly, every time you find something new, stick it up on a blog. The challenge here is to find information and integrate it into the bigger picture. Because otherwise what you've got is people finding pieces of jigsaw, throwing all this jigsaw into the morass, and it's like you've got a 5,000 piece jigsaw. You've got no picture, but you've got a 5,000 piece jigsaw. And while you've just got that set of 5,000 pieces in front of you, there's a chance that you can actually put that picture together, even though you haven't got the master picture. But then if somebody else comes along and empties on top of it another 5,000 piece jigsaw, and then somebody comes along and tips another 5,000 piece jigsaw, and then says, okay, your challenge is still to put the original picture together, it's really, really tough.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you that there's a whole lot of people out there working for, let's call them the away team, who are very definitely tipping 5,000 piece jigsaws on top of the main jigsaw. Because they have every intention of making it as difficult as possible for people to uncover what it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
That said, of course, we also, I'm sure we'll talk later, they're becoming more and more arrogant. And so once you do actually have that first picture together, you can actually see patterns, and then it becomes quite easy to put the other jigsaws together. And I think I would say that in the short time that Rick was with us in this physical realm, and the short time that he was doing this kind of research, he has undoubtedly made a very, very significant contribution, and obviously undoubtedly made a big impact. In fact, I have incorporated some of his work into a couple of the presentations that I've done this year. And what's interesting as well, one of the things that I have to say is that, one of the things that I've learned in the course of, my research is that I don't have an original idea in my head. And even when I think I've come up with something original, I can pretty much guarantee that if I search, even for a relatively short time, I can find people that have come up with this stuff beforehand.
Yes.
It's very evident that, more and more people are tapping into this stuff. And I'll give you an example. I actually gave a presentation, I think, about the same time that you were talking to Rick. And I actually put in that presentation a slide, a PowerPoint slide, which showed the Mayan calendar rotating in each of the 5 rings. Now, at that time, I hadn't seen Rick's blog, and I'd had no contact with Rick. And then I saw it on his blog. So there's a classic example of, effectively us. I mean, it's not particularly, totally revolutionary.
Sure.
But, nonetheless, it was a classic case of 2 of us coming up with, a particular aspect at exactly the same moment.
Yes.
And I've had many, many experiences of that during the course of, of my research. And I'm sure, many other people listening to you can relate to exactly the same thing.
Yes. And by the way, I think that the web kind of visualizes this almost in a way, if you will, because of the nature of the blogs that you were talking about, that as soon as people have one piece of the puzzle, that they're throwing it out there and people can, nibble on it, so to speak, and pick up on it or expand it further or whatever. But this really kind of gives you almost like a real-time map, if you will, if one tracks, all the blogs and so forth, of course. But this gives you like a real-time map of the human, conscious in a way, or the overmind, if you will, in one way.
And of course, what we have seen here is a phenomenal revolution in the opportunity for consciousness to absorb this information. I mean, literally in the last 20 years maximum. Because, whereas before the advent of the web, this research and integration of the information would have to be done the hard way. i.e. either, by spending time at a library or in correspondence with people. I mean, now it's instantaneous, and I think that, most of the current generation of researchers would acknowledge that, we could not have done what we do today 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And, I don't believe that it's any accident that, of course, we have access to the web at this time. We have the irony. Of course, the web has its shadow side. And, that shadow side is that a statistic I saw earlier this year is that 90% of all non-business related activity on the web is related to pornography. Yeah. So that's the shadow side. And, of course, Rick, touched on that in his research. And likewise, I mean, this I think actually sort of also reflects the challenge that we all have to face today, and this is actually dealing with our shadow self. And
yes.
I mean, unfortunately, obviously, in sort of recent weeks and perhaps even months, what Rick was clearly having some difficulty with is countering that part of him that wasn't able to integrate with this third dimensional reality, and unfortunately, ultimately, that's the part that won the day.
Yes. So, do you think that there's a danger in one way there? Because again, I'm not for the idea of saying that you should be afraid of going into certain areas or what have you, but
no, most definitely not.
Exactly. But with that.
Your eyes open.
Yeah, exactly. But with that being said, I mean, do you think that there is a danger in that people have access to so much of this information so easily now? Is there a danger there?
Yes, there is a danger. I mean, of that there is no doubt. I mean, Rick, I'm 10 years into this research now. At 52, I mean, I enjoyed sort of close on 40 years, totally locked into the third dimensional secular empirical material realm. The transition period for me was close on 5 years. And that was 5 years when, I was not quite a recluse, but, not far off. My cave was a boat on the canals in Amsterdam.
Right.
And, I was able to hole up there and, go through this process and integrate, what it was that I was experiencing and what it was I was learning. I mean, in the course of my work, I've built up a library. I mean, I'm standing in my library now. I mean, it's a library of some 5,000 books. Because what I realized as I went through this transitory stage, this transpersonal process, if you like, what I realized was that basically everything I thought I knew was wrong.
Yes.
And so I absolutely and unequivocally acknowledged that I had to completely re-educate myself. And most of that I've done through reading, research, and I mean, obviously, at the appropriate time, certain teachers have come my way and passed on their little tidbit of information, if you like, and then moved on. And that leads me to move forward, if you like, at my own pace. But I think in terms of if I look back, in that transitory part of the process, there was a very real danger. I mean, I absolutely understand paranoia.
Yes.
And one of the reasons that I was almost deliberately putting myself into the sort of paranoid state was because I know that I'm not naturally paranoid, and I wanted to understand what it was that was making me paranoid. So I was a glutton for punishment in that respect. I certainly stared into the abyss. And, there was perhaps, the odd occasion when I thought that I wasn't going to be able to find my way out. But, I had the appropriate guides along the way. And I was given, if you like, the map to help me find my way through. Yes. And it wasn't until, in fact, I can tell you that 9/11 was the absolute catalyst for me. And anybody that was traveling through Central America in the year 2001, if they were traveling through Belize and traveling through Plasencia, there's a very good possibility that they would have stopped off in a bar there called the Purple Space Monkey. And through much of the summer of 2001, I could be found propping up the bar there in the evening, having spent my day, doing research. But I could be found propping up the bar. And one of the things that I was very adamant about at that time was that I was predicting that the US were about to create